Welcome to the All Financial Hour podcast with Steve All.
Every once in a while, there's a story that grabs me by the collar and says, do what? And here's one, okay? There are Americans, in fact, the majority, in fact, that are more afraid of going broke in retirement than they are of death itself. According to a new Allianz Life poll, it says that 65% of people they measured are rattled by inflation, taxes, and the shaky future of Social Security. And with so much uncertainty, I want to know, Steve, how are you handling those concerns with your clients, especially when there's some people that literally are afraid of poverty more than they are of terminality?
Yeah, that reminds me of that statistic. They would rather be the body at the funeral than the person talking at a funeral.
Oh, gosh.
You start to look at that. And then so you go, yes. I think that's one of the greatest fears that people have today. The major question is, Steve, when can I retire? Right. And will I run out of money? That's the fear most people have. And that's the fear most people don't come in and sit down and get an analyst around it. They'll just automatically assume they heard it on a commercial somewhere or they read it in a thing. You got to have $2 million to retire. And I sit there and go, how do they come up with numbers like this? Because to me, it is more about what are you spending? What does retirement look like for you? Two people that came into my office. One young man had $2.7 million, and another couple comes in and they got $450,000 to $600,000. And I always ask the question, which one can retire? Everybody raises their hand when I say the guy with $2.7 million. And I say, he was mad when he left my office because I told him he couldn't retire. And they're going, $2.7 million and this guy can't retire? He was 60 years old. He had a $250,000 lifestyle. You do the math. Yeah. He's got 10 years and he's going to run out of money because it was predominantly an IRA and deferred compensation. Well, then you go to the other couple. They got $500,000 to $600,000, but they got pensions. They got Social Security and a lifestyle that's well under their means. Well, they're not pulling money out of their portfolios. They could have a possibility of a problem later in life because of inflation, but they don't have to drastically change their lifestyle. They can keep doing the things that we're going to do. So the idea around it of it is do you have a plan? Because I think the planning is the most important thing that we're looking at. And I think that plan has to have some pillars in it. Taxes. Everybody's got questions about taxes. Are taxes going to be higher or lower? I remember 15 years ago, we used to do presentations and people would argue about which way those were going. Most people today believe taxes will be higher. Well, if they're going to be higher, should we look at tax strategies? Income generation. How am I going to replace that paycheck? If I've got a lifestyle of X, what am I going to be able to do that? I think that's probably the thing that most people have the biggest question. Steve, how am I going to replace this paycheck when I don't work anymore? Social Security optimization. They talked about it right here. The future of Social Security. I think you better optimize it now. If they're possibly going to cut it in the future, I want to get as much of it as I can. A lot of people are going the other direction. Just give it to me now because I might not get it later. I think Congress will fix it. I don't think it'll look the same, but I think they'll fix it. So I think delaying is the best thing that we can do if you have the funds to be able to do that with. And then we look at legacy planning. Of course. Most of us didn't plan on leaving assets to our children, but we're going to. Why don't we look at this and say, how could we best pass those assets on to our children? When we get to investment philosophies, I believe your investment philosophy should be based on need, not greed. Give me the best return that I can possibly get with the least amount of risk possible. And I think you need to protect that. If you're getting close to retirement, those sequence of returns, if we have bad years in those first couple of years that you're retired, can heavily affect you. So I believe protection of the asset can be very, very, very important. And there are tools out there that we can use that the money can't go down due to market volatility. So a little bit we talked about there. Market volatility has everybody going a little crazy right now. But I think the plan is something that you can focus upon. So if you're looking for somebody that's more than just an investment advisor, somebody that will put you in stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, and they're not a financial planner, give me a call now. Ask for that comprehensive retirement plan. Let's give you that thing you can focus on. So when uncertainty hits like it has right now, you have something to focus upon versus all the noise from the media. Give us a call now. Ask for that comprehensive retirement plan.
Before we move on for this, Steve, I'm just curious because you've been in this a long time and you've seen a lot of things come and go. Do people seem more afraid today than they were 10 years ago? I just want to kind of compare eras versus the recession, which I guess is more like 15 years ago, but just to kind of get a feel because it seems like the freak out level's pretty high, but I'm old enough to remember 2008 too.
Yeah, but you look at it to the point where the difference in the time frame, I think the fear is always the same, Doug, because everybody's looking at the same thing. I've worked my entire life, and I'm getting ready to not work anymore. Have I saved enough, and can I do what I want to do? I think that question is just as relevant today as if the market was up 25% and you asked that question.
That's
because usually when we have large returns, what's the possibility? Larger falls. So we have to look at it, and the question that I always have to look at is your plan designed to do no matter what the market does? Because the only promise that I can make is markets will go up, they will go down, or they're going to stay flat. And the question of it is your plan designed that the only way you can successfully retire is to have an 8 to 10% return? That's not a plan I would want to work with. I would want something that's, hey, we're going to have gives and takes in the market. Yeah. Do you have the availability to meet your income needs no matter what the market does? Because I think that's the most important thing when it comes to retirement. How much money can I spend? And the only money that you can spend is what? After tax money.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
So having the plan, I think, is the most. Yes, everybody's got questions, whether we're coming off the pandemic. Okay, now what do I do? If we're coming off of the financial collapse, now what do I do? If we're 7 years after the fall of 20 to 2022 and the markets are going crazy, what do we do now? Right before 09. So every time there's usually a headwind or a tailwind that we have to look at. It's just different things. 5 years ago, what were we talking about? Ultra low interest rates, and you can't do anything with it. Then interest rates rose. Now, companies, the insurance companies, there's more pennies in the dollar. They've got better caps and things. Whereas when the interest rates were real low, their caps got real bad. So we had to look a lot harder for things that we feel would fit for our clients.
Now, you travel a lot, Steve. You just talked about being at the Grand Prix. You've been all over the country. Well, if you're planning to check luggage, people, on your next flight, don't forget you might have to pay as much as $45 per bag, and even discounted airlines like Southwest are starting to charge for their checked bags. At least they announced these fee hikes, although there are some other fees within airline travel that seem to be a little bit baked in. But, Steve, many retirement savers are also paying hidden fees in their portfolios. So, real quickly, how do you help them check for those?
Well, what we like to do is when we do the analysis, you've heard me tell people if you want a risk-reward analysis, how much risk are you taking for the reward that you're currently getting? And when we do that, we also do a fee analysis. If somebody's got an annuity, whether it's a fixed indexed annuity, a variable annuity, we're going to do what we call an annuity x-ray. All that is we're going to call the insurance company that you bought the annuity from. And we're just going to ask them simple questions like, what is your M&E expenses? How much are you paying for internal management fees? What about income riders? We're going to know what those fees are. And the highest I've ever seen in fees within a variable annuity is about 4.3%. And you look at 4.3% drag off of a portfolio, that's a pretty heavy drag. It's not going to last a whole long. It's got to have some pretty good returns just to stay on the positive side. But everything out there has internal fees. I don't care if you're talking about most fixed indexed annuities. Exchange traded funds, ETFs, have internal fees. Mutual funds. I'm not as big of a fan for mutual funds because the internal fees are higher. Those are the fees that you don't see.
Right.
And all that is a drag on your return. So what I like to do is run the analysis and we look at it and say, here's what your internal fees are by prospectus. We run a Morningstar report. I use a third-party reporting to sit here and say, okay, what do they say their fees are And I think that's the important thing to do, because everybody has fees. I charge fees. I like to tell you up front what my fees are going to be when we're in the beginning of the planning process.
Yes.
Why? I don't want to get to the end and you say, God, I like everything you've done, Steve. What's it going to cost me? I would rather tell you that up front, because if all you're doing is getting investment advice for your fee, that might not be enough. My question is, what are you getting for that fee? Are you getting any of the tax analysis work? Are you getting the income plans? Are you getting the other things that we like to add to it? So if you're not sure what your fees are.
Steve, would you be surprised to know, and you've talked to people for years and years, that according to a recent study, 53% of retirees don't have a spending plan? Is that surprising at all? They just take money from their accounts as they need it, called picking at the pile, right? And how often have you seen this, Steve, get people into trouble? And how could income planning avoid that whole picking at the pile, running out of the money thing?
It's very, very, very common. I think one of the most difficult things for people when they come in to sit down and talk with somebody like me is, I'm going to ask that question. How much does your lifestyle cost? And you don't know how many people the answer is, I don't know. Now, I also have the people that have 15 spreadsheets that can tell me everything for the last 25 years, but the bulk of the people don't know. And so I have to back into that sometimes. And it's that idea of, what is your net paycheck? Because everybody, I get paid $100 and some odd $1,000 a year. No. How much do you bring home? Well, I bring home X number of dollars. How many times do you get paid? Do you get paid twice a month? Every other week. Every other week. All right. So then we look at it and said, how much are you putting back for retirement? Well, I do that in my 401k. Okay. So they've already taken that money out. Right. And I said, well, my guesstimate is you're spending all that. Oh, there's no way. We'll come down with a number. And there's no way. I don't spend that much in a month. And I'm going, well, if it's in your paycheck and it's going into your checking account, and you're not putting it into a retirement vehicle, you're spending it. No. I set it aside and I go on vacation later in the year. I said, that's timing. That's just timing. So that's what we have to look at to try to back into that number. Sometimes that's how we get to that number is what are you bringing home? Because I can look at it and sit there and say, you can say you're spending $4,000 a month and you're bringing in $8,000. But if you don't have a lot of assets in what I call the non-qualified or after-tax bracket, you don't have a big amount over there, you're fairly well spending all the money that you make. So I think having an income plan is the most important thing that you can do. Cindy came in to talk with us. Divorced. She had alimony. She has her own Social Security. She had her own a small pension. And we set it down and we figured out with Cindy, how much is that gap between those two numbers? And that gap ended to be about $1,500 is what she was going to be short to fill that gap. So we had to look at it. So if you're like Cindy and there is a gap between what you bring home every month in fixed income and what your expenses are, what are my options? One, I can guarantee it. I can do what we call personally funded pension. Yeah, it's a fixed index annuity with an income rider that once you turn that income on, it's going to last for the rest of your life. And it's guaranteed by the insurance company. That's one way we can fill that gap. Two, we can set enough of your assets aside to do what they call the 4% rule. Well, we're just going to take 4% of the growth in your portfolio every year, and we're going to spend it. I like to add 2 to 3 years to that number. And the reason why I do that, what if you would have picked 2000, the year you retired, or 2007? I want to have the availability of a couple bad years up front, if that could possibly happen. Or you can build a bond portfolio or a dividend-paying stock portfolio and set that money aside. They'll make around 5 to 6% is the number that we're looking for with those types of portfolios. Well, everybody, I look at it and say, well, which one would you use? I said, well, I look at the one, what would cost me the least? Well, if I go with the personally funded pension, I usually get the statement, but Steve, that's illiquid. And I said, yeah, it is. I've put money aside, and in 3 years, we're turning on an income from the rest of your life. So yeah, it is illiquid. But I said, so is that stock portfolio. Well, what do you mean it's illiquid? Well, if it takes X number of dollars to give me that 4% that I'm looking for, and I spend half of it, it's not going to give me that 4% anymore. And if I do the same thing with my dividend or bond portfolio and spend half of it, it's not going to create the income you're looking on. So they're all illiquid, different investment vehicles, but you can't spend them or you're not going to create the income. So if you're looking for something that you know you're going to have a gap between Social Security, pensions, and your lifestyle, let's sit down and do an income plan so we can look at the options for you on how you're going to replace that paycheck once you retire. I think it's part of that comprehensive retirement plan, and it's probably the most important part if you have that gap. How are you going to replace that paycheck?
Another thing that people may need a second set of eyes on is if they're deciding to move and where. If you're getting close to retirement, you may be thinking about moving somewhere warmer, even a place with a different tax bracket, right? In fact, in many cases, people are moving to states that don't have any state income tax, like Florida, Texas, and Washington. So, Steve, does moving to a tax-friendly state make that much of a difference to the retiree, especially when they're not taking a traditional income, right? And if not, are there easier ways to put more cash in their pockets without moving?
Well, you start to look at it, and I think the funniest thing is, you shared the results of that survey with me. And you look at it, the top 5 states retirees moved to were Massachusetts, Florida, Illinois, Kentucky, and North Carolina. Those were the top 5 states. Yeah. The top 5 states that retirees moved from in 2024, California, New Hampshire, Virginia, Florida, and Wisconsin. Florida made both.
Yeah, they did. And Massachusetts is a higher income
I was
state,
shocked to see that
so
one.
Was Illinois, right? I mean, both
Yeah,
of
they're
those.
both what I can – well, they're the state of Illinois does give some advantage for people here on the river.
Okay.
The people on the river here, the state of Illinois, if I'm starting to look at Roth conversions or something like that, they don't have to pay that state tax on that Roth conversion.
Ah, okay.
So their distributions from IRAs and 401ks are not taxed for state purposes. They're still taxed for federal purposes. So that does give when you start to look at that. But just moving only for taxes could be a plus or it could be a minus. And that's when I look in Florida being in both of these things. Yes, they don't have a state income tax, but insurance is very high, especially if you're anywhere near coastal. Why?
Sure.
Because they've had a lot more hurricanes in the last years. Move people into the state of Florida. So there's a lot more houses in Florida than there are people when it starts to look at it because – I'm not normally in my place in Florida when hurricanes hit. June the 1st, I think, is the official start of hurricane season.
Sure.
My wife comes back to St. Louis. So we go from those. But if you're thinking about moving, I think one of the stories that I like to tell people is we had a couple that their kids moved out to California and they wanted to be there with them. And we sat down and we talked with them. And when they said, do yourself a favor. Why don't you just rent till you can figure out where you want to be? Ooh, yeah. Los Angeles is a big area, and there's a lot of different things. Well, they went out there. They bought a house. Because of the fact that they're so expensive there, they bought a fixer-upper, got the fixer-upper complete, and then what happened? The kids moved.
Oh, no.
They weren't there long enough to recoup the dollars that they really spent on the remodelization of the place that they were having. So I like to put it to the point where if you're going to do it, go down and visit.
Thanks for listening to the All Financial Hour podcast.
Insurance products are offered through the insurance business All Insurance Group, LLC, AIG. All Financial Group, LLC is an investment advisory practice that offers products and services through Impact Partnership Wealth, LLC, IPW, a registered investment advisor. IPW does not offer insurance products. The insurance products offered by All Insurance Group, LLC, AIG are not subject to investment advisory requirements. IPW and All Insurance Group, LLC, AIG are not affiliated companies. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying abilities of the issuing carrier. This radio show is intended for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual's situation. All Financial Group LLC is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during this show shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. The information and opinions contained herein provided by third parties have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by All Financial Group LLC.
This radio show is intended for information purposes only.